Welcome to this episode of Sweet Speak. Now we're going to do something a little bit different this week. We've been talking AI from leaders in cybersecurity, IT, VCs, education, and oh so much more. Well, this week we're going to talk about how do you talk about these things better? What I mean is, how can you be a better presenter? So I'm excited to hear from Ian Hawkins and Pete Grimes. Ian's a writer turned comedian, international multidiscipline guy. He wrote for comedians for 11 years before taking the stage himself, tells stories, jokes, and oh so much more. Based in London, wrote for BBC One, Channel 4, and others, former lead of Toastmasters, host of numerous events across Europe, along with the quiz show. Well, Pete's a veteran marketer with stints as the head of marketing at organizations such as Oracle, Datamine, Samsung, Nokia, and more. The founder of Legacy Thought Leaders and Legacy Keepers, a best-selling author of C-Level Author, and I've shared the stage with him many times across North America, leading conferences large and small. Ian as well. Ian has led conferences and events all over the place. So what does this mean? We know what works. We know what doesn't. We're going to give you tips, tricks to be the best presenter you can be. Stick around. Today we're going to talk about presentations. What works, what doesn't, common pitfalls, maximizing your presentation, and soliciting honest feedback. So to start out and get the ball rolling here, Ian, if you wouldn't mind, talk to me a little bit about what stood out to you, an example of a presentation that was truly impactful.
I've seen a lot of presentations. I've seen a lot of professional speakers. One of the jobs that I did before I got on stage myself was I was a speaker agent at the UK's biggest speaker agency. So pretty much worked with everybody and their dog, quite literally in some cases. So I've seen a lot of speeches and I've seen a lot of the best paid speakers in the world. And I was thinking about this question a lot. There is a Olympic rower called Ben Hunt Davis. Probably not the first person you think of when I say Olympic athlete. He's one of 8 people in the boat that was pulling away. And I saw him speak years ago, and I can still remember one of his key points. And it was this, which was when he was in training, the coach would just keep saying, does this make the boat go faster? And it became this sort of overarching metaphor that he then talked about. And if somebody says, do you want to come to the pub tonight? He would go, does it make the boat go faster? No, going to the pub is not going to make the boat go faster. No, I'm not coming to the pub. If somebody said, do you want to go to the gym for squeezing an extra workout? Will it make the boat go faster? Yes, it might do. And he just hung his entire presentation on just nailing this one thing over and over again. And to this day, it just becomes, if you want to focus on a task, if you want to achieve something, just ask yourself, is what I'm going to do, is it going to make the boat go faster? And it just becomes a metaphor that just sort of shortcuts straight into your brain. And I said this to somebody this morning. I said, I'm doing this thing this afternoon about talking about a really impactful speech. And I remember this. And I said, does it make the boat go faster? And my friend said, I've heard that somewhere. I was like, of course, everybody that's heard it cannot forget it. Does it make the boat go faster? Yes, then let's do it. That's probably the most impactful. The most impactful speaker generally is a guy called Chris Moon, who stood on a landmine, blew his arm and his leg off. And that is not the most interesting thing about him. But what he has this, it's an incredibly authentic story, because when he talks about living life as a disabled man or having to pull yourself together and get on and do stuff, you look at him and you go, yeah, you've earned the right to tell us that. So those are the two I would say. Chris Moon, an amazing speaker, and Ben Hunt Davis, does it make the boat go faster? Those are my 2 top tips.
Pete, so how important is those storytelling elements, to a successful presentation? It's not just spewing out facts and figures.
Right. I love that, because that kind of goes to one of the other topics we're going to be talking about later, which is having a through line. So that story that Ian brought up is a through line, and you could refer back to that the whole time. And so I think the through line why we are here is to how can we make this decision to present and speak in public easier for the people on the call, because there's some people who've never done it and are nervous about doing that. We've seen them, JD, when we've done these events, people saying, how do I get involved? Other people who are doing it, but still just hate it. It's that famous Seinfeld quote that, according to most studies, I'm reading it off my notes here, that people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. So that means that the average person, if you go to a funeral, you're better off being in the casket than giving the eulogy, right? People just really hate it. So I think what we'd love to do here is to take that pressure off people, give them the tools, allow them to be comfortable about delivering their message the way they do it. They don't have to read a script. They don't have to memorize anything. Just be comfortable. And we're going to get into some of those details in a second, I believe.
I think it's also important to craft your message in a way that makes it personal. Right. If you put something out of yourself, it's more than just I'm reading facts and figures about zero trust framework or what AI is doing. Craft it in, for example, I was in the ER yesterday. I'm fine. My son fell at recess, got a big old goose egg. But we learned things as far as patience and what that does in the emergency room. And you can equate that to your message too. It's having patience while you're dealing with your teams. We're talking zero trust framework, getting the full data. But by bringing it personal to begin with, people are engaged going, well, I've been there before. I've experienced that before too. And by making it personal, I think is important. Ian, are there specific techniques or tools that you've seen used effectively to sustain audience attention?
Well, I just want to go back to your time in the A&E, actually, because I'm currently involved in a program to teach doctors how to speak in front of other people. Because if you are if you get injured or you get sick or you get something that's complicated, how do you then explain it as a doctor to that person what they have? So much of how we feel about ourselves is about the stories we tell ourselves. So just to give you an example, I had heart surgery in 1984. I didn't understand anything about it. It was incredibly traumatic because I didn't understand what open heart surgery meant. Barely knew what a heart did. Very sort of vague about what it was. My nephew, because it's a genetic condition, my nephew's had the same surgery a couple of years ago. And when I went to see him in hospital, he was having counseling because it was really important that we understand, because, surgery is such a big story. Your son will probably always remember that time he went to A&E, and the stories he tells himself about it depends whether it is a trauma or a learning experience, or whether it was fun or whether it was, not. So the stories we do, I think, are really, really important. Sorry, JD, could you just repeat the question? Because I just wanted to go to that before we went on.
No worries. That's the hero's journey. That's the oldest formula in the book, right? From Star Wars to everything else, the hero's journey. And so, how did you get that epiphany? So that's kind of at the core of it. So JD put himself in that position where he's learning something there. And how did you get to that story? And I love that because you become the expert, and the idea of taking the pressure off the people here want to present. Don't get caught up in the details and memorizing it. No one knows you made a mistake the way you said it. You're the expert. And so just thrive on that and share that story, and people become authentic, and let them know you have these problems because they want to know how you solve them, because they're facing those same problems. And so that's how you get into their head. Sorry, Ian, I just wanted to jump on that as well. That was really important.
JD, this conversation is not going to go linear. I tell you that now.
It's interesting. One thing we should put out there to begin with, if you're scared of it, Pete, you talked about it's public speaking and death, right? Those are the two biggest fears. You remove a little bit of the fear when you sit and go, listen, everybody in that audience wants me to succeed. They don't want to see me up there failing. They're there because they want to see me be successful. They want to learn something, maybe be entertained. But at the end of the day, it's like going to a comedy club. You're going to go there to laugh. That's your goal, right? The goal of these attendees is they want to see you succeed and they want to learn. So I guess back to my other question for you, Ian, then, is how techniques and tools to capture that audience, to get that attention throughout the presentation.
I have a system which I think applies to absolutely every time you step onto a stage or in front of a microphone or in front of a camera. And it is this. The first and fundamental thing is you need to be in charge. You need to have control of yourself. Okay, so when everything else goes wrong, you go, right, what can I control? Me, my breathing. Okay, this is where so many people make a mistake, is because they go, everything is happening all over the place all at once. Right, no, well, ignore that. Worry about what you can do. So think about yourself, right? Am I in control of myself and my space? That's the first thing. The second thing is looking around going, what does this audience actually want? What are they here for? The audience right now is interested in talking about tips and ideas on how to be a better speaker in front of other people. So let's do that. Let's make sure the conversation's about that. And let's not do a beautiful 3-part harmony of Les Miserables. Fabulous as it will be, gents, that's not what this audience wants. We have to stick onto the topic. And finally, a subject that's come up already is authenticity. You have to be yourself. If it's not you, your authentic, real person, giving something of yourself to the audience, then it might as well be a PowerPoint, or it might as well be a PDF that they read later. Mm-hmm. And once you combine those three things, be in charge of yourself, give the audience kind of what they want, and do it in a way that only you can do it, that's the sort of pyramid for me that works.
Right. It's true. And we know stories stick, right? That's the other thing. It's like stories and pictures, from earliest cavemen to your kindergarten classroom, right? And so me in particular, you want to engage the audience right away and then keep them engaged. I don't use bullet points hardly ever. I like to use pictures because people remember that. It also keeps me from reading the slides because, as you mentioned, Ian, nobody's going there to listen to you read the slides off, which so many people do. We're going to talk about that in a second, I'm sure. So it's going through pictures that they know. JD knows this. We talk to CISOs, cybersecurity experts, and I put this big picture on the stage of an offensive lineman from their hometown, right? So it's like, hey, anyone a football fan here, sports fan? Everyone, of course, is going to jump up and cheer on the Bears or cheer on the Packers, or, and then say, so, how does this relate to being a cybersecurity expert? So the offensive linemen, the most famous ones, you never hear their name called. Because if their name's called, it means someone's throwing a flag at them, they've held, right? It's kind of the same for cybersecurity experts, because when their name's in the newspaper, it's usually not for a good thing, right? So this is the connection. So I get them involved because they're local team. Then I connect it. It's like, who's ready to talk about cybersecurity now? And everyone's like, okay, Pete, let's get into this. And that's kind of how I would kick it off in terms of tips and tricks for people out there who want to do something similar in their area of expertise.
Well, I agree, Pete. And it's a matter of avoiding death by PowerPoint. I love this slide. I made this a while ago. This is a presentation slide, right? Be impactful. Do you see bullets? But you have an image that elicits emotion within your audience. Your subject matter might be around that, right? It's being impactful, like we're talking about here today, make it personal, but avoiding death by PowerPoint, those slides are easy to fall into. I always recommend, and I'd love to get your take on this as well, Ian. I always recommend having a PDF. Put a QR code up there, a PDF of all the charts and slides with tons of stuff on it that people can download and read afterwards. You've got them. They're listening to you. I often say slides go up, eyeballs go down. Yeah. People are on their phones. You don't have their attention. Now, slides can be good. I've also witnessed definitely presentations where somebody's just talking the whole time. They may not have the most exciting voice, and that puts you to sleep too. So having that balance, I think, is important. Ian, from your experience, I know you do a lot of coaching on this as well.
Well, I think Pete is quite right. Storytelling is the important thing, and that bit in the middle, giving the audience what they want. An overloaded slide is not giving that audience what they want. When you get to the end of your speech, you want that audience to be enthused to go, actually, I will download the stats. I will look at the PDF. I will find out all the detail. But the speech itself should be about enthusing that audience to go and want to learn more. They should get to the end of the speech and go, I want to know more. They shouldn't be at the end of your speech and go, thank God that's over.
It's like house guests, as my dad says. You got to leave while they still want you to stay. not after they've already hoping you were to go, right?
There is that as well. And I always find that for me, there's a lot about the relationship you have with an audience. So classic things that people say to nervous speakers, I don't hold much truck with any of them. You did the best one, JD, which is that everybody wants you to do well. Nobody wants to go and see a bad speaker. And what do I hear? I hear people saying, imagine the audience is naked. Right? Yuck, first of all. Open with a joke. I hate that advice. And what those two things both do, is they both try and artificially say to you, you be the boss, you take control, right? You humiliate that audience by making yourself bigger. And that's not what good leadership and what good authority should really be about. Mm-hmm. Speaking in front of other people is an act of leadership. And we have good leaders and bad leaders. And the worst leaders are the ones that humiliate and put people down and put them in their place. The best leaders are the ones that accept their authority and turn it into a service. And when you do that, that is speaking gold.
Yeah, I agree that the word service really resonates with me, Ian, because everyone has a story to tell. Again, the idea of taking the pressure off people here, it's like their unique message is unique to them. Nobody's seen the trials and tribulations they have. No one's found the solutions in the way they have. People want to hear them. They want them to succeed. They want to get something productive from this presentation, as JD mentioned. So having that through message and making sure that they're going to have something to walk away with is good. Like from beginning to end, people save the questions for the end, but you can actually pull people at the beginning and get the audience engaged right away, whether it's using some application on a phone or just by the traditional show of hands. This also takes the pressure off the presenter because they could just ask questions and get the audience involved right away. It also allows you to frame the rest of your topics here. JD and I have done this too, when you're in an audience where there are some CTOs and some CIOs. How many CIOs or how many CISOs here? So now you're framing the rest of your presentation to that audience. I think that's really, really good.
I saw someone the other day and she literally looked across the room and she talked about some kind of quite complicated idea. And she looked across and she just went, none of you have ever heard this before, have you? I went, no, we haven't. And she went, well, let me give you the really quick example. And she just went completely off script. You could tell she'd wandered off script now. But what she was doing was she was checking in with the audience and making sure that we were all following her. The script is so often what gets between a speaker and the audience. And if you get rid of the script, or Pete, you mentioned bullet points earlier. If you can get rid of that and just turn it into a conversation and make sure that it is a speech isn't a monologue, it's a conversation between you and an audience.
Well, I was just going to mention when you're at a conference, oftentimes, and I want to bring this back to you, Pete, but when you're at a conference, you might be the third presentation, right? They've already set through, or you're the fifth, the 10th presentation, if you will. You still need to win them over and be a little bit different, right? And that's okay. I saw this one fantastic woman. She started off and she's like, I lead yoga. Well, this was a technology conference. I lead yoga. Had everybody stand up, stretch their head one side, stretch their head the other side, stretch their arms, put their arm in front of them, their other arm in front of them, bring them together, do it again, do it again. Thank you so much for the ovation. Now let's jump on it, right? It got our attention in a fun and unique way, but you do have to engage. So my question actually to you, Pete, then is, we've seen presentations happen where people are losing the audience. If that happens, what can presenters do to re-engage in real time on the stage if they see the eyeballs are going down or they're losing that audience?
Right. So I have two answers to that. One, as Ian mentioned before, making eye contact, engaging people to begin with is really good. what you can do is walk off the stage, and walk down to the audience and ask someone a question. Maybe it's that person you've been making eye contact with already. That's as soon as you walk off the stage, people pay attention. Or like the old, high school teacher routine. It's like, okay, in a minute, I'm going to ask you a question, and let me just get through this last slide. And the people are already paying attention. That's kind of like the equivalent to, this will be on your test. So people pay attention. So there are different things like that. One thing too is that I always, when you do that, when there's that other pregnant pause, when you say, are there any questions, and no one answers, that's another big problem for a lot of presentations. Everybody hates that. One, you don't want to run out of time. You want to do Q&A. So you save 5 or 10 minutes. Now you say, okay, I have these 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions? And when they don't, it's really uncomfortable. So there are 2 approaches to this. One is to have a plant in there, someone who's going to ask you that first question. So I have Ian in the audience. Ian, throw me a question, because once you do, other people will jump in, right? Because you've broken the ice. Or 2, you as the presenter have a slide prepared that's a really controversial question. Just nothing but the question, like the kind of font visual is got milk. It's like, are you understaffed? Are you dealing with budget cuts? Whatever it is, but that one question, which is going to provoke a response. So if they don't have a question for you, your plan B is to have a question for them, and let them know, if you don't have a question for me, I'll ask you a question. And that also gets people motivated as well.
I have 2 approaches to this as well, which are also slightly different. First thing is, I always say at the end of this speech, there will be a Q&A. So what I don't want to do is me to ask for questions and there'll be a horrible silence. So when I'm speaking, do think of questions. And then when it gets to the Q&A, the reason why people don't want to put their hand up is because they've gone into audience mode. And as I say, speaking is an act of leadership, and to go from a follower to a leader and ask a question, it's really hard for them. So I say, are there any questions? And so the first question people ask me often at these is, how important is being able to tell a story? And I quickly answer it, and I say, now, does anybody else have a question? And that just sort of gets people into it. So I'm stealing both of those though, Pete.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is really important too, and JD's mentioned this a lot, just having your unique approach. I love that yoga thing and applauding. That was really good. I kind of fell into public speaking because I was head of marketing for a company, and we lost our chairperson. They said, who's going to be the MC? Who's going to do it? Pete, can you do it? And I thought, well, yeah, I guess I can. And they said, you got to do this, that, and the other things. And I said, well, first things first, I'm not going to read a script. If I do it, I'm going to do it my own way. And I was nervous, really. And so I just had music going on, like if you guys have played sports. I know JD has shown like his casts and slings as proof of that. When you play music at the beginning, get pumped up, right? So I had music going on before we hit the stage, and this company is very conservative. It's like, what are we doing with this music? This is crazy. And I ran on stage, had the adrenaline going, and I was bounding from side to side, and it went off well. And I told my story with pictures and everything else. And the point is that you could use that nervousness and adrenaline to your benefit, right? And is what I did. And just to be unique in your own presentation way. Like I wasn't going to have them tell me how I was going to present, because this is something I tell a lot of speakers. You're going there, you're talking about your slides from Shell, Exxon, Coca-Cola, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you're representing your company, but you're also representing yourself. So don't forget that, because next year you're going to be at a different company potentially. Right. So protect your brand, be yourself on stage.
Just thinking about your yoga lady, JD, because Pete's brought her up again, and she does fulfill my 3 things. She walks on and has authority, stand up and do this. And she tells people, and she expects you to stand up and put your hands up. She gives the audience not necessarily what they want, but certainly what they need. They need a little break, and they need to relax and unwind and get themselves into a different headspace. And she does it in an authentic way, because she's a yoga instructor. She did all the bends and pretzels and things and made herself all bendy. And you go, right, but she's walking the talk there. She's a proper yoga person. So she fulfills those 3 things: authority, audience, and authenticity. She fulfills those things in an unexpected way. And if you can do that and surprise people, then that I think is also quite powerful.
Right.
Yeah, one thing that I see as well is you're talking about the questions at the end. Anytime you say, Anybody have any questions? Nobody's gonna have a question, right? It's avoiding those yes nos, and having that plant, like you were saying, Pete, is important. Also, knowing the time allotted for you, right? If you're at a conference, you've got, let's say, 25 minutes. Have 25 minutes or 23 minutes of material. Don't think I'm going to talk for 10 minutes, then it's a Q&A after that. That will fail 9 times out of 10. So be aware of your ending time and fill that time that you've been given. One thing that I'm curious about, and I'll start with you here, Ian, is stage mishaps, tech mishaps, microphone's not working, video's not happening. Don't have video if you can help it, please. That, again, is your QR link at the end of your presentation. Here's a video that drives home what I'm talking about. Download this. But those tech mishaps can throw anybody off, especially those who are nervous to be on stage to begin with. What are some strategies to recover gracefully from this, Ian?
Those of us that have done this for a job know that tech mishaps will just happen. I've had fire alarms, I've had power cuts, I've had the whole shaboogie. And the most important thing is to be in charge. Be in charge of that which you can control. So what you don't do is shout and scream at the AV guys, because it is not their fault necessarily. And even if it is their fault, it's a bad look to shout at them. Yes. So what I would tend to do, right, imagine worst case scenario, no sound, no lights. There's 300 people out there in the conference room. What I would do is I would say, clearly this hasn't gone to plan. I'm going to wander over and see if we can get everything back up and running and look like you're taking charge, because the audience will just see you as being the fulcrum on which everything rests. Wander over to AV and just go, right, when can we get all this back? And see, and just take the deep breaths and be in control of yourself, because losing your temper or losing your cool will get you absolutely nowhere. Usually they'll have a fix, but it's not in my wheelhouse to be able to fix a light or a sound, but they're going to be the ones that eventually get you out of trouble. And when they do, when the lights come back and the sound comes back, say, ladies and gentlemen, will you please thank and know their names, the people on the sound desk.
Right.
That's how I would do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. And along the ideas of a through line, if our through line today is to empower people to take the stage and take the microphone and feel comfortable on stage. I was trying to coach someone earlier how to do this, and JD knows this, that the first step usually is joining a panel rather than doing a keynote. It's a lot easier because it's more of a conversation like we're doing today. So we had convinced this guy to join a panel. He's a brilliant technician. Come join us. And at the last minute, things happen. We've all been at events, something's going to go wrong. And the other panelists didn't show up. It was just him in the end. His worst nightmare had come true. And so I said, well, you know what? We have these questions that we worked on ahead of time. Let's just bring our seats down into the audience. It was a smallish audience in this particular event, and just ask them the question. So you're odd numbers, I'm even numbers. Let's rock this. So we sat down. We just interviewed the audience with the questions that I had for the panel. We just did it with the audience. And so it was just a way, kind of like what you're saying, Ian, keep a cool head, take control of the situation, work with what's in your control, and that's it. And, hope for the best. And, people do want you to succeed, as JD mentioned. And so this audience was extremely happy. It's very engaging. It was a happy ending in the end. And everyone loves a happy ending.
Everyone loves a happy ending. Back in my stand-up days, I did the Edinburgh Festival, and I played a deliberately smallish room which could only fit 30 people into it. And usually it was sold out because it wasn't very difficult to get 30 people together. But this is the Edinburgh Festival, and there's thousands of shows on. And on 2 nights in the month-long run that I did, we had 4 people in the audience. And what do? Do you go out and you perform your stand-up routine at them? And no, you can't do that, because that's not what the energy is. And what you eventually do is you grab a drink, you sit down with them, and you have a conversation where you steer it right in the direction of all your jokes, and you become the most entertaining person they've ever had a drink with.
Exactly.
And then you go home exhausted, because that's really tiring. But they've had a really good time. And you go, actually, those 4 people had a good time. I had a good time. I worked hard, and they all, we made that work, and it was fine.
One thing with that as well, Ian, is looking at your audience, right? You may expect an audience of 200 people, and you go in there and there's 4. Do you stand behind a podium when there's 4 people in there? I recommend no. What I've seen work really well is you've got a smaller audience than you anticipate. It's often like church. They're not in the first pews, right? They're farther back. Go to them, right? Step away from the podium if you have the ability with a microphone or a lapel mic. Walk to them. Sit at the edge of the table and have a conversation as part of your presentation. It's knowing how to tailor your approach to the different audiences, and being able to do that on the fly is important. And again, a good anecdote, Ian's got a great one where he had to deliver bad news to the Queen once. I have one where I delivered the news sitting on the back of a bull. Both true stories, but connect with the audience in any way you can there. So go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I was just going to say charisma. People say, what's charisma? You either got it or you don't. Charisma is about having accessible authority. If you can take your authority down from the stage, because you're right, if there's 4 people in the audience and they're sitting at the back and you're behind a podium, then playing the authoritarian at that point is massive overkill. If you wander down, if you saunter down and say, I'm still in charge, suddenly people realize that you're a human being and you're very accessible. That's when you become charismatic, because people go, we suddenly felt this was happening just for us. And if you want to see this done really well, go and see a really good stand-up comedian, because they will give you the feeling that there's a nowness to live comedy when it works, that it doesn't feel scripted. It genuinely feels like there's nothing else this person could be saying apart from what they're saying right now. And when it works, it's magic. And that's what you try and capture every time.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. We showed up at one event and there's just a small group of people, and kind of what you guys have both been saying. So just got off the stage, went down, asked everyone who they were, give me a fun fact about yourself. And so by the end of the day, say there's a dozen, 2 dozen people there, everyone had shared a fun fact. So for the rest of the day, people would refer to the chess master, this kung fu guy, this other guy who, did hang gliding in Rio, but it brought everyone closer together. So turning a disadvantage to your advantage. And just being light on your feet, taking control of the situation. So something's going to go wrong. You just got to be prepared to deal with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and figuring out a way to make the joke land isn't offensive.
Yeah, I always say I love playing the Phil Donahue, right? And taking the microphone and, I ask a question, raise your hand and then going, and everybody's got a name tag at these conferences. Hey, Sarah, talk to me about, don't ask a yes or no question. Start with talk to me about, right? Because they will respond. It won't be like, oh, yes. They're gonna dive in, and you're still the subject matter expert, so you can build off of whatever they're talking about because it's around your subject matter. But playing that Phil Donahue again gives you that authoritative power in the room. You're in control, but you're engaging, which I think is important. So we talked about avoiding a lot of slides if you can. No bullet points, give those things later. You've done your presentation. Talk to me about, Ian, I'll start with you, soliciting genuine feedback. Yeah, you want people to slap you on the back. Oh, that was great. Yeah, that's good for your ego. But how do you solicit feedback that you can make actionable?
I think there's a couple of things. One is I've got a coach who helps me load when I'm giving presentations and speeches. And God love him, he has got no poker face. If I walk off stage and I haven't done well, I just look over and Taz is sitting there so going, okay, fine. It wasn't vintage. And he keeps me very accountable. So there's on the one hand, there's get a coach because they'll tell you the truth. If you're trying to get, if you're working the corporate space and you've got a big corporate audience, I find you're right. If you say, give me some feedback, they'll say, oh, you're marvelous, darling. Congratulations, a triumph, which isn't very useful. Find out what people learned. That's the question I would ask. What did you learn today? Because that will tell you what people's interests are and where they're at. And also to give yourself an easy time of it. I coach a lot of speakers, and they go, "Oh, I was terrible. I slurred my words, or I messed this point up, or I put up the wrong slide, or this happened." And you say, "Well, what did people take away from it?" And if they go, "I took away this, this, and this," you go, "Well, kind of let yourself off the hook." That's what Pete was saying earlier. Let yourself off the hook. If they've taken away these three things, then that's kind of fine. Give yourself a little break here. Okay, what would you rather? Would you rather have a wonderful actor deliver a speech, deliver a script beautifully, or would you rather have somebody giving their authentic expertise in a way maybe that isn't absolutely perfect, but is authentic and genuine and from the heart? And I think we'd all go, I'd rather have the real deal.
Right, exactly. That's right on point. You know, I tell people, like, a quick takeaway is to speak, and I'm going to get to the point where you ask for feedback, but how do you give the best presentation? And one of those is, and I tell people, remember the grandmother rule. Like, we all in our own heads, and we're explaining these complex situations, but could you explain this to your grandmother? Would she understand it? You know, because we are surrounded by engineers and have these complex slides with a lot of acronyms, which is a no-no as well, as we all know. Don't use acronyms. But so just remember that grandmother rule. Will she get it? And so I love the Maya Angelou quote that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So you've given them something, as you mentioned, Ian, something that they've learned, you know, at the end of it, they'll feel good about it. It's been productive for them. And so that's more important than slurring your words or getting the right pronunciation for this very complex technical term. That's really it. So at the end of the presentation, it's like, if you don't remember anything else, remember this. And whatever is being the key theme in your presentation, tell them again. So it's marketing. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them again. At the very end, if you remember nothing else, and this is when the people who are on their phones put their phone down and say, okay, I want to hear what JD's saying now. You know, I want to tune in again to hear what Ian's saying or what Pete's saying. And they'll remember that. And so that will be their takeaway, and they'll feel productive about it.
Well, Ben Hunt Davis, does it make the boat go faster? You know, if you remember something next week or next year or in 10 years' time, that's a successful speech. It kind of doesn't matter how Ben Hunt Davis did it. You know, what you remember is, does it make the boat go faster? Yes. Has that helped me in my daily life? Well, yes, it has, because it's meant that I've been able to commit and focus on the things that really matter and ignore the ones that don't. Right. Well, that's a successful speech, whether you actually delivered it well or not.
Right.
The value you get from it is the most important thing.
I like to tell people, Ian, that, you know, your message truly matters, because there's this imposter syndrome, and people think, well, what am I going to tell people? You know, I want to get on stage. What do they care what I have to say? Your message really matters. You have a unique perspective. So, and I know there's anxiety around this, but if you could change one person's life, if someone listens to you and their life becomes a little bit better, doesn't that make you motivated to actually share your message? You know, does that help you overcome this anxiety? It's like, well, heck yeah, I want to get out and share my message now, because I could change someone's life. Even if it's one person, it's worth it. So, you know, I like to motivate people that way.
100%, 100%. And also, I remember doing a stand-up set in Aldershot, and it was about 200 guys from the army. And I was with a wonderful comedian called Izzy Lawrence, and I looked through the curtains, and I just turned to her and I said, "There are no women in this audience." And she looked at me and she went, "Oh, God." And I went, "Well, I think you'll do all right. I'm not sure they'll I don't think they'll go for my brand of camp tomfoolery." Anyway, I went out and I was going, am I going to tell them I'm gay or not? Am I going to tell them am I not? And at about the 10-minute mark, I went, do you know what? I'm going to do it. And I did a load of jokes about being gay. And it was when I came off stage, and everything went fine, because of course it went fine, because they don't care. If you care about somebody else's sexuality, you're a weirdo. But as I walked up, I suddenly thought, what if out of those 200 guys, what if there was 1 or 2 or 5 guys that were gay and weren't telling their friends?
Right. Wow.
Okay. And then they've looked around and they've seen zero hostility from their mates. Actually, that's quite, you know, all right. And that's why it's a job. That's why it's a gig I remember, because I walked off across the car park afterwards thinking, yeah, I might have helped somebody out there. That's
Wow.
not bad. Good
Give
job.
me goosebumps, Ian. I got goosebumps.
Yeah,
Good story,
that's a
isn't it?
great story. And I also tell people, make yourself available afterwards, right? There's usually a happy hour, or if you're speaking before lunch, make yourself available for conversation, right? Because someone may not raise their hand up in front of a full room, but they'll, with a cocktail in their hand, come over and ask you, more about what you were talking about. And making yourself available is important, which kind of goes to my next question here is, how do we get legs from a presentation? So we just, all the buildup, we had our presentation. It doesn't have to end there. A couple of things I'm thinking about, and I love your guys' take on this as well, is if you recorded it, fantastic, right? You can use that recording, 9 ways to Sunday, but you also have your transcript of what you were talking about, or you can build that. Make it a white paper, make it into a blog, put it onto a podcast, right? There's different things you can do there. And then you can slice and dice it a billion ways in social, right? If you did record it, use a tool like Opus Clip or whatever to put it across on social in bite-sized chunks. That one talk that you had for 25 minutes could be 25 pieces of content to continue to get your message out there, and also to elicit more feedback and start conversations across whatever channel you choose. I'm curious, the both of you, and Pete, I'll start with you. How do you recommend getting more legs out of your presentation once it's done?
JD, I love you. I don't know if you did this intentionally, but you just basically set me up for something I wanted to share with people, which is, one of the things that I'm moving towards as well, and this comes from speaking to many of these speakers. They always ask, well, what's next? What do I do next? I'm a C-level executive, getting to the twilight of my career. I want to pay it forward. I said, so when you're tired of, these PowerPoint presentations, you want to make a greater impact, maybe you respond to the people who've been telling you for years, you should write a book. Like for me, the next step is a book. You've done these PowerPoint presentations. When you want your impact to go beyond that hotel ballroom and impact more people's life, it's writing a book. And so that's why I started a program I call Legacy Thought Leadership, because it goes beyond being just, an influencer where you're worried about vanity statistics or product placements, or a thought leader, which is just worried about talking to the audience. No one wants to be talked at anymore, right? So, you want to make an impact. You want to make a long-term impact. So by writing a book, you can turn that into, as you mentioned before, you sparse it out and slice it and dice it into many different marketing tools and opportunities later on. And so I tell people, even if it's just to check that box, get your book done. But there are many doors it opens up as well. So I put this program together for these speakers who are wondering what's next. Speak your book into existence. It's called Legacy Thought Leadership. It's the easiest way to become an author, expand your impact, and strengthen your legacy, which is really important for these leaders, to teach the leaders of the future. And so that would be my action item for these people, who are on these speaking circuits. Get your book done. You're already sharing, your message resonates. Turn that message into a book and expand your impact that way. So I don't know if that was the purpose of that question, but thank you for asking me.
It wasn't, but I'm glad I teed you up, buddy.
I've bought Pete's book right before we came on air. I got really excited, and I did the worst possible thing, Pete, which is I bought it with my personal money, not with my business account. So,
wow.
C-level author. Yeah, I've got that. That's going to be coming through the post.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thank you both for that. So you're the two who bought my book. I'm so excited to know that I'll be able to pay the rent this month. But
no, you've got to send it to the UK though, Pete. So it might chip away at some of your profits.
Yeah. Right. But it's as easy as using your phone. So I tell people. So everyone loves to speak. So anyway, go ahead. But thank you guys.
Well,
I appreciate it.
I will say, Pete's inspired me. I have my first book coming out hopefully before Christmas.
Wow.
So keep an eye out for a Sweet Speak book that'll be coming out. So as we wrap up here, I have to ask you both. We heard from Pete. He's got Legacy Thought Leaders. Ian, what do you have cooking right now?
What have I got going right now? I have. So I'm trying to do more coaching because I really enjoy coaching and it's something I'm really passionate about. So just to answer your last question, the thing that I try and make sure that I do at the end of every speech or presentation I do is to make sure my LinkedIn details go up as a QR code because I want to connect with people on LinkedIn. That's where my legs are. And to say, look, if you've got a speech coming up and you're nervous about it, let's book a 15-minute coffee. It's not going to cost you anything. And I'm passionate. I don't want people to give bad speeches. I want people to do really well. So I'll have a coffee with anybody and just say, this is what you need to work on. The other thing I have, Pete, you've done your book, I'll do mine, which is that I've produced 2 books.
Wow. Okay.
And as you can see, they're not big reads. And because storytelling is so important, I wanted to do a book that was for kids, but that grown-ups would get stuff out of. So there's games and there's puzzles in there that helps you be a better storyteller. And whether you're 4 years old or 44 years old, you will get something out of that book. And then this is Golden Rules of Professional Speakers, slightly more grown up, but only a little bit. Similar format. And it's just, these are the basics, these are the fundamentals that anybody can understand. And if you book me for a conference or something, I'll bring a stack of these and I'll give them away because I want people. I want to go to a conference and never be bored. I want to be amazed by what I see on that stage.
That's great.
All right, gentlemen. Parting shot for us here. One last bit of advice you give to people who are going to jump on stage and present. Pete, start with you.
I would say just take one of these tips that you've heard today and start using them on your very next presentation. Just, turn this into actionable advice. Whatever it is, one of the things that stuck with you, whether it's pulling someone at the beginning to make sure they're engaged and there's a heartbeat, or just using pictures for one time to just so you don't read through your slides, or anything like that. But just make sure you put some of these tips into action as soon as you can. Yeah,
I think that's great, Pete. I would say if you're on stage, it's your party. And that means it's your party. You be a good host, but also you've got to look out for your guests and see what they want. So make it a bit of a two-way thing. But it's your party. If they get drunk and rowdy, you can throw them out. But you also do want people to have a good time.
Those hecklers, right? Managing those
I love a heckler.
I don't know why.
They look so sweet.
I'm sure you do.
Well,
gentlemen.
People worry about hecklers, but the truth is they've given you the microphone for a reason.
Right.
And they haven't given that schmuck in the audience a microphone for another very good reason.
He's out of his league. He's totally out of his league. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you both so much for being part of this. You can listen to this as a podcast. As always, Sweet Speak is available wherever you get your podcasts, and also our partner podcast called Sea Level Up. Check those out, and also check out our Sweet Speak dinner series as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, JD.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Really fun.
Thank you for tuning into this special episode of Sweet Speak, brought to you by James Dwayne Group. To catch more episodes of Sweet Speak or our partner podcast, Sea Level Up, visit jamesdwayne.com. That's DWAYNE, or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Prefer video? Watch the full Sweet Speak interviews in the video section at jamesdwayne.com or on the James Dwayne YouTube channel.